This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. This is the second episode in a series of interviews with the kids of Atari's Youth Advisory Board. Beginning in 1982 to 1983, Atari invited 20 kids aged 14 through 18 to be on its new Youth Advisory Board. For the board, Atari was looking for well-rounded computer-literate kids with equal representation of sexes and a mix of ethnic groups. Anneke Wyman, now Anneke Wyman de Boer, was one of those kids. A wire service article about the Youth Advisory Board by Kathy Holub ran in several newspapers around March 25, 1983. Here's an excerpt from that story. The fat world of corporate perks isn't just for executives anymore. On Sunday, 14-year-old Anneke Wyman of New York flew to San Francisco on a prepaid plane ticket to dine out on pizza and attend her first corporate board meeting. As members of Atari's new Youth Advisory Board, they got the sort of pampering reserved for top corporate clients, including a private movie screening, a tour of San Francisco, and all the food they could eat. What did they do to deserve all this? They can't figure it out. It's almost a fantasy, Anneke said, giggling. I had a 3-minute interview calling from a payphone at school. The dime ran out, and I thought, well, I'll never hear from them again. A few weeks later, they told me I was in. Now I'm sort of nervous. The video game market, once monopolized by Atari, has become as fiercely competitive as the home computer and educational software markets, and Atari hopes the kids can keep the company on the right track on all fronts. The 20 young board members are expected to keep Atari in touch with its market. Later it says, Anneke has danced in about 60 performances of the Nutcracker Suite with the New York City Ballet and can write computer programs in 4 languages. Her career? I don't know yet, she said, but I'm much better in math and science. My interview with Anneke took place on April 5th, 2018.
I went to a traditional conservative private all-girls day school in Manhattan. And we had a fairly progressive headmaster who I now understand polarized the parent community with some of his teaching practices, one of which was involving computers at a young age, which nowadays, of course, sounds very different to my kids today would not believe that it would be polarizing as to whether or not you would involve a computer. But at the time, I think it was. And I really liked math and science, so I started getting involved in computer clubs and computer programming classes and really liked it.
Nice. And what kind of computers were you using at the school?
This is incredibly embarrassing. I have no idea. I know I learned to program at the time in BASIC, Logo, Fortran, and Pascal.
Wow.
Those were the languages I was using. We had a computer room and it had refrigerator-sized units in it, but what they actually were, I don't know.
Okay, so it was probably, mainframe or mini computer level stuff as opposed to microcomputers, Ataris and Apples and things.
No, it was definitely a giant mainframe system.
Nice. Cool. All right, so you were doing computers and I guess you were also doing ballet at the same time?
I was doing a lot of ballet at the same time. As I said, I grew up in Manhattan. My aunt, my mother's sister, is actually a figure skating judge, and my parents met figure skating. So I did a lot of figure skating, and to work on my artistic impression in figure skating, I started taking ballet because as a little girl, they kind of went hand in hand. You did ballet, figure skating, and gymnastics. And I got into the New York City Ballet School, which is called the School of American Ballet, when I was 8, I believe, 7 or 8, and did 3 seasons of the Nutcracker at Lincoln Center. So I was a soldier for 2 years when I was, I think, 9 and 10, and then I was a candy cane or hoop when I was 12 in the second act. And so, 3 seasons of lots of ballet up to eventually, probably around the same time as I was doing the Atari Youth Advisory Board, it was about 5 times a week. So, hour and a half, 5 times a week.
Wow. Busy. You're a busy person.
Yes.
Cool. It just seems like, I don't know, just to bring it up because it seems like very diverse interests. I mean, it's, a girl could be interested in ballet or computers, but like both, it seems like opposite ends of the spectrum. So, yeah.
I guess, but I was sort of mathy, sciencey, precise. I don't know.
Yeah.
I liked both. And actually, I was trying to think of how with the Atari Youth Advisory Board, and I honestly don't remember how I heard about it. What I do remember very clearly is my interview for it, which was at lunchtime from a payphone in the hallway in my school, where I had to call someone in California collect because I was calling from a payphone at school, and it had to be lunchtime because that was, of course, morning in California. And I remember talking about a lot of things, but not about computer science. And I think actually what they were looking for was, they accepted that I think anyone who applied was interested in computer science, and what they wanted were people who had other interests. So I don't specifically remember discussing ballet at all, but I'm sure I did, because at that point I would have been in Nutcracker for 2 seasons. So I'm sure I would have mentioned it.
Sure. So what year was this? Do you know? Or what grade you were in, or just sort of time stamp it?
It would have been we went out to, I believe, California in March of 1983. Does that sound right to you?
I believe so.
So this would have been autumn of 82.
Okay.
Was when I got interviewed.
All right. So you were interviewed, and then what happened? How long did you wait? How did you find out you got in, etc.?
I found out I got in from a letter, a physical snail mail letter. And I remember my parents not actually being that excited about it. Yes, they were, of course, pleased for me. But it was during spring break. And my parents were already in the process of making for spring break. And it was going to conflict because obviously I needed to be in California and not skiing with my parents.
Mm-hmm. So, and you went on this trip by yourself, right? Not taking a parent or chaperone?
No, I didn't take a parent or anything. I went on the trip by myself. It wasn't the first time I'd flown by myself, but it was sort of a different trip. My mother actually eventually ended up flying out also to San Francisco and picked me up at the end, and then we went on vacation together. But I went out by myself, was met at the airport with a bunch of other teenagers. My memory is that I was at the younger end of the spectrum. I don't know if that's true or if I was just naive, but I remember feeling young in the group of 20. I remember being incredibly impressed that Todd Bridges was one of the other members because, of course, I had seen him on TV, and it was the first time I was meeting someone, from a TV set. So that, to me, as a New Yorker, was quite exciting. I guess maybe if you live in California, you see TV stars a bit more often, but living in New York, I didn't. And it was now I think of it, it was a fairly adult experience. Obviously they tried to make it kid friendly, but we had sort of lectures and tours and speeches where we sat in a ballroom at, large dining tables with Atari executives who were kind of picking our brains on what we liked and what we didn't like about essentially computer games. Nowadays, of course, that would be normal to me because it was sort of a conference room, a ballroom, a conference where those are the sorts of events you would go to. You'd have a presentation, you'd have a breakout session, you'd sit down for a coffee at a big round table. But as a 14-year-old, it felt very grown up. And that's, I guess, back to why I say I don't know if I was young or if everyone felt the same way.
Or maybe this company didn't know how to put on an event for kids, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good initiative. It was interesting. I don't want to say it was negative, but the tour of a couple of the facilities was very interesting, but I think we all felt a bit out of our depth.
Sure. I'd like to talk more about the specifics of what you remember. Let's talk about the tours. Let's talk about the brainstorming sessions. I know this is a long time ago, but maybe there's a couple of things specifics that you can remember.
It's a really long time ago. I remember being interviewed by like the San Jose News, who were writing lots of articles about it. So that I remember quite clearly. And I remember a tour of essentially a video arcade area where we got to play on a whole lot of games that I assume must have been prototypes, and then asked what we liked, what we didn't like, what worked, what didn't work, that sort of stuff. And those to me were the two fun events, if you will. The other presentations and the tour of what must have been a manufacturing facility, the computers in California, I don't really know. I would assume now you'd make them in China, but that to me was sort of more academically interesting, but not anything that I could add anything to.
Sure. They took you all to see a movie, perhaps?
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, no one has remembered what the movie was, so I guess it was not a memorable movie.
Exactly. I remember going out to eat, and we sort of were being paraded around. I actually still have the red jacket that we got, sort of a nylon windbreaker type thing, which it was bright red, and it had red and white, like red, white, red striping around the edges, and an Atari logo on it. And my mother actually wore it up until recently because it fits her now better than it fits me. So I remember those sorts of things. I don't remember the movie. I remember having to wear this jacket sort of going out to eat because I think that was an easy way for them to find all of us.
So aside from the trouble of having to rearrange holiday plans, how did your parents feel about this, do you think? I mean, this is like, we're sending off our kid to California for, it had to be weird for a parent to do that, maybe?
Yes and no. I mean, I think they were really proud of me. They were really impressed. They knew I liked math and science and was good at math and science. So in that sense, being on something like this, they thought was an amazing opportunity, and they were 100% once they sort of got over the initial shock of the planning logistics. But my father in particular my father was a Dutch immigrant to America. He moved from the Netherlands to New York to get a PhD, and he firmly believed that education was the way to get ahead. And so he thought that if I was learning about computers and computers were going to be the wave of the future, that was what I should be doing.
Sure. Did you make any friends out on this trip?
At the time, yes, and I stayed in touch with them for a year or two, but really that was about it. I didn't, other than Todd Bridges, I wouldn't be able to tell you the names of any of the other people today.
So, I mean, summarize the trip for me. Was it, at the time, was it an amazing experience, or was it like, it was kind of fun, now back to my real life? How'd you feel about it?
Oh, no, I thought it was an amazing experience because I was honored to have been chosen. I think it was just a complete, overwhelming sense of lots of different impressions coming at you, and we were scheduled from, dawn to dusk, and didn't really have time to absorb the experience that we were going through, if that makes sense. We kind of were shuffled around and were paraded around, probably is a better phrasing for it. So I didn't really reflect on it while I was there. Sure, I had fun.
Yeah.
But it was only sort of a year later, or when I was applying to college and, could say these sorts of things, that I realized that
You said paraded around a couple of times. Do you feel like part of it was for show? Was it for the San Jose Mercury News? Was it for the media? Like, oh, what a hip company we are listening to kids?
Cynically, yeah, of course you could have that impression. I think they genuinely valued our opinion. What I questioned was whether or not they knew how to use us. So of course they were using us for marketing purposes. Whether or not, I don't think it was solely marketing. I think they genuinely were trying to figure out, I guess, who they were as a company, where they wanted to go. And this was an idea, and it got them good publicity. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can divorce the publicity from, was it purely marketing? I don't think you can say that. I do think that they found it challenging to figure out how to use us. And I think the prime example of that would be that they sent us home with a computer. And before you ask, no, I don't remember what model of computer it was.
It was probably a 1200 XL.
Okay. And they said that they were going to send us programs to test. And the first thing they sent me was Visicalc, which, what did I have with a sort of accounting spreadsheet? I was a teenager in 9th grade. My dad tried to use it. My dad actually used the computer for a lot longer than I did, because I went off to boarding school the next year and didn't take it. Which again tells you sort of what the value was of the computer that they'd given me, because I didn't even think to take it to boarding school with me. But other than Visicalc, I don't think they sent me any software to be tested. So that plays into what you said earlier. Was it a marketing exercise, mm-hmm. or what I said, which is they didn't know how to use us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you have a computer at home prior to them giving you that machine?
No.
So did you end up using it for anything other than testing out Visicalc for 10 minutes? Did you do any programming on it, since you knew languages and that sort of thing?
I did do a bit of programming on it that summer. I don't remember what I programmed or what I did, but I do remember doing some programming on it sort of in my spare time to have fun.
Nice.
And I think the only other thing that they used me for, I don't know if they did the same with others, was I got asked, and I think it was the following Christmas, maybe. I remember it being cold, to work and represent them at an event at the Club Med American headquarters, because Atari was planning to install sort of, I don't know, podiums, if you will, screens around all the Club Meds in North America, with details of what the schedule would be and what was on at certain times of day, and directions and maps and all that sort of thing, mm-hmm. which again today would seem like a perfectly normal thing for there to be.
Sure.
I can't believe that it was touchscreen, but I have the vision of what it looked like, and I don't know how it couldn't have been touchscreen. But anyway, I remember having to present to the Club Med executives, most of whom seemed to be French, how easy it was to use the system. And literally, they had me and another New York area person arrive about half an hour in advance. And, we'd figured it out immediately. And it was, to my brain, extraordinarily intuitive. And I remember the Club Med people, and it was sort of several of the senior executives, and then a lot of, I guess, people from the villages, sort of managers from their various resorts, not finding it at all intuitive to use. And I think that was just a generational, divide in the same way as at the time I programmed my parents' VCR, and currently my children, set me up for a Netflix account.
Right.
So, I don't want to draw anything into it. But I thought it was, that they were trying to use us just to show, look, these kids just arrived. You saw that what time they showed up. They figured out the whole system. People in your villages at Club Med will find this is really easy, that they can get directions, they can see interactive maps, they can see what time there's a yoga class, that sort of thing.
Interesting. And where do they ship you off to do this?
It was Fifth Avenue in the 50s in Manhattan. Oh. It was the sort of the Club Med office building, headquarters, reception area kind of thing. It was a Club Med office.
So how did your time with the Youth Advisory Board end? Did it just sort of fizzle out, or did they? How did it come to an end?
From memory, it just really fizzled out. From memory, my three real interactions, if you will, or four, I guess, was the interview, the weekend in California, the receipt of the Visicalc, which is imprinted upon my brain. They want me to evaluate this. And then I really think it was the Christmas thereafter, so 9 months thereafter, doing this Club Med event. And that, to my memory, is really the last I heard from them. And that gets back to I don't think they knew how to deal with us, or what use we as potential consumers or programmer employees could be to them. I just think there was a disconnect between kind of who we were and what they hoped to get out of us.
Sure. That makes sense. This podcast is listened to by people who still like to play with their Atari computers. If you could send a message to people who still love this machine, what would you tell them?
I like old historical objects, and I'm using that word lightly. It's historical, but I think there's sort of a beauty and an elegance in old-fashioned technology. And, I think I wish I still had the computer. I have absolutely no idea where it is. It probably is in my parents' attic in New York, so I can probably find it. I really don't know what I would say to them. I'm sorry.
All right. What do you do today?
I currently am a stay-at-home mom. I have two teenage boys who are 17 and 15. I, for a long time, stayed very involved in not computers, but math and science. So I went to college planning to major in math. Didn't. Ended up double majoring in economics and Asian studies. But remember using computer programming skills when I was trying to do econometric modeling, that having these sort of analytical and logical skills from basic programming, not the language basic, but just generally beginning programming skills. I think that logic sort of carried me through for a long time.
Yeah, awesome.
You mentioned that no one seems to remember what the film was.
Yes.
The movie. Sorry, I've lived over here for 25 years, so I know words like film other than. What are everyone else's impressions? Are they similar to mine? Are they different?
Pretty similar, actually. I've talked to two other people so far. So that'll.
But I think, that in itself, the fact that three of us, don't remember much, or two of us don't remember much, and one doesn't really remember anything.
Yeah.
I think tells you a lot about the program, because had it been an amazing program, or had they used us extensively, or had it continued or ended with something, we'd all remember a lot more of it, and we would have all taken a lot more out of the experience.
You're right. Absolutely. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.